Clerk, are we prepared?
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to call to order the September 17th meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County. Call to order first, and then we'll do the roll call. Madam Clerk.
Darren Tedford. It's hard to. Bob Lucy is not present at this time. Mayor Lawson. Here. Neil Majardin.
Here.
Vaughn Harton.
Here.
Vaughn. Oscar Delgado. Here. Adam Spear.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. At this time, we'll move into the Pledge of Allegiance. And if we could get Michael Moreno, would you mind leading us in the pledge? Thank you very much. At this time, we'll move into general public comment. I have a couple of cards here under general public comment. We're going to start with Amanda Nelson, and then I had a Chastity Lockridge, which did not put down a specific agenda item, so I'm not sure if she wanted to speak under general public comment. Okay, so we'll start with Amanda Nelson, then Chastity Lockridge.
Good morning, board members. My name is Amanda Nelson. I'm a driver for RTC Ride. I am here today to discuss your hired contractor, Keolis. For the past 2 years, this company has been systematically shutting down your system, your transportation system. They have mistreated your essential workers, many of whom have decided to leave. Drivers of 20+ years have found other employment. You have allowed Keolis to reduce service to the passengers, the voters, taxpayers of our community. The reduction of service doesn't stem from COVID-19, but because they cannot retain employees. Why is nothing being done to compel this French company to get drivers? Why, even with reduced service, do I get an inbox full of missed trips alerts every single day? Management does not care about us. Keolis is now putting the family-friendly scheduling privilege that we are afforded on the chopping block. How many more will leave before RTC will realize that Keolis is bad for Washoe County? When passengers think of buses, they see RTC, not Keolis. They look at RTC. It is time to step in and compel this company to do better. Your bus system will fail if Keolis continues down this path of union busting. We are Teamsters, we are strong, and we will continue to fight this fight. It is time for you to step in and help our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chastity Lockridge.
Good morning, Lady Chairperson and board members. I'm Chastity Lockridge. I'm a driver with Keolis. I'm sure we've heard how much has been wrong like a broken record when it comes down to the current state of affairs with Keolis. My passengers are concerned with the future of RTC's bus service. There is no guarantees or stability in service they have relied on for years. Is that not a statement that we need a change or an intervention? Are we not worried what Keolis is doing to RTC's reputation, let alone to the city of Reno's reputation? As a vacation destination, convention destination, and transportation hub, people rely on city transportation to take a break from driving or just the convenience of leaving local road travel to a professional and take the guesswork out of finding their locations, as well as our locals for work, doctor's appointments, and daily living travel. The locals are well aware of how unreliable the bus services are, and the visitors are finding out real quick. Taking bus revenue away and giving it to rideshare instead. Reputation is everything. Being voted on a board or hired for a company that is a visibly sinking ship in the eyes of the public looks bad on everyone. Being a driver for Keolis, it's our face they see, but RTC's reputation that is tarnished. What is the long-term goal here? What's next month gonna look like? What's it gonna look like in 3 months? We are grossly understaffed. We have exhausted the commercial driving pool that we hire from in Reno, forcing to find and hire and train new people. And when you hire from a green pool, you get people looking for just any job, which lead to bad fits. Short term, or people who find out that this isn't the job for them, or people that aren't safe because training is too short, leaving them unprepared. This leads to money and time wasted when they leave, and then there's still a vacancy. There is no incentive for Keolis to do more than the bare minimum. Do you want that lack of drive on your watch? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I have another one that was just passed on, Gary Watson. You didn't put an agenda item. I don't know if you want under general or if there's a specific agenda item. Thank you very much. Come on down.
Good morning. Gary Watson, President, Teamsters Local 533. Another month has passed since your last meeting. Another month of the elected officials and this MPO doing nothing to repair its broken transit system. Pointing the finger at everyone but themselves who are the overseers. This community needs a reliable and a safe transit system. When is the public to get its taxes spent in the best interest? Going to get its taxes spent in the best interest. When are you as the RTC going to start holding Keolis accountable for their incompetence? This transit system is being deteriorated. The RTC is responsible for Keolis mismanagement. You hired him. And you should fire him. Being 60-plus operators short with no accountability gives Keolis an extra $4 million in profits per year of taxpayer money. Also, our community and its passengers can suffer with reduced to no service on numerous routes. Again, a rebid has to happen because you're reducing more service. This hurts local businesses, it hurts employment, and it hurts the economy. No accountability hurts everyone but your contractor, Keolis. 60-plus coach operators and numerous mechanics have quit because Keolis is downright rotten to work for. They hate women. They hate all their employees. Keolis management even stated to a female employee in front of me earlier this week that they don't give an F word about them or their fellow employees. Real professional. Who states this to their employees? Keolis does. You hired this monster. You guys need to get rid of him. They need to get out of this town. This is why your system is failing and it's spiraling out of control. The passengers deserve better here. This community deserves better. I've spoken with many of your passengers. They love their coach operators. They do not have nice things to say about Keolis. The common thing I hear from the passengers, Keolis is the worst bus operator we have seen. Transit is unreliable. Listen to them. Listen to the passengers. Listen to the employees. They are the ones that deserve better. Keolis should be held accountable. You should be holding them accountable. The transit workers should be treated as your community partners, not your enemies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, is there any more general public comment?
There's no more public comment.
Thank you very much. We'll move into item 3, the approval of the agenda. Director Thomas, do we have any items to modify or pull?
Chair Jordan, no, we don't.
Thank you very much. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Any opposed? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. This time, we're moving into item 4, consent items. Do any of the commissioners have any items they wish to pull for discussion? Hearing none, may I get a motion? I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Item 5, discussion items and presentations. Item 5.1, authorize staff to present the 7th edition of the RIF General Manual. I'm not going to go through the full description, that's a long one. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Dale Keller, Engineering Manager with the RTC. So today I'm here to present the Regional Road Impact Fee, or RIF 7th Edition update. As a refresher, and before we jump into the proposed changes, regional road impact fees are a funding tool to collect the cost of new development's fair share on our regional roadways. So as an example, a new development comes online, the local agencies collect the fee through the building permit process. Those fees are then transferred to the RTC, then the RTC uses those funds to help provide funding for our roadway capacity projects. This program has its advantages and its limitations. It is a way for development to pay its fair share. It is viewed as an equitable system supported by our community. There are limitations. These impact fees must be used on capacity. Impact fees cannot be used for operating costs, maintenance costs, or non-capacity improvements. This program is governed by NRS 278B, which allows local governments to enact impact fee ordinances. To administer this program, each local agency, the City of Reno, City of Sparks, Washoe County, and the RTC, entered into a 4-party interlocal cooperative agreement outlining the roles and responsibilities. The RIF program has 2 components, the first one being the Capital Improvements Plan, or the CIP, that describes the methodology to establish the net cost per service unit for each new roadway capacity, as well as the last bullet point is the General Administrative Manual, or GAM, which has the guidelines and procedures to administer the RIF program. So why are we going through the update right now? In accordance with those provisions of the Interlocal Cooperative Agreement, the RTC is responsible for initiating periodic reviews of the RIF program. So this review process was initiated by the approval of the long-term 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, or the 2050 RTP. And the RIF program uses RTC's transportation planning process, as reflected in the 2050 RTP, to define the list of capital improvements necessitated by and attributed to new development. And this update wasn't performed in a vacuum. The 7th edition was developed through the RIF Technical Advisory Committee, comprised of local agency staff, RTC staff, members of the planning commissions, as well as members of the development community. So for now over a year, the RIF TAC has actually provided input and guidance through this update process. So the remainder of the presentation is going to talk about the proposed changes to the RIF fees. This diagram shows the 3 basic steps involved in developing RIF fees, beginning with step 1 in red, which is the known land use assumptions determined by the TMRPA land use development model. Step 2 in green is taking that and determining and developing the regional transportation plan, identifying needed capacity improvements. And then 3rd step in blue, where the RIF program comes in to determine new developments, share those costs of those capacity improvements, as well as that bottom line circled in red, the impact fee rates and the fee schedule by individual development type. So taking a step back, NRS requires capital improvements and demands for those facilities to be measured in service units. In our case, we use vehicles mile travel, or VMT, as our standard measurement to create that link between supply, which is our roadway capacity, and demand, which is the traffic generated by new development. So back to step 1, to estimate the VMT growth over the 10-year time period, we use this consensus forecast by TMRPA to help generate what type and where the growth is planned to occur. Step 2, this is where RTC planning jumps in to identify that population employment, assign that to parcels or zones into the RTC's travel demand model. And the model is used to determine where the capacity improvements are needed by the regional road network by 1, the time frame, when it's going to occur, and then 2nd is the trip distance, shown on the screen in red and orange there. So the orange section is the route, show the use of the regional road distance, and that has a direct input to the RIF calculation fee. And this process is reiterated over and over again, and the results are aggregated to determine the average trip length between the north and south service areas, shown in green and blue respectively. So the travel demand calculates the growth, and the last part of the equation is the cost. The RIF program uses the RTP to determine What's those capacity needs in the next 10 years? As you see on the screen, we talk about the 2021 to 2025 timeframe, and then the 2026 to 2030 timeframe. As I mentioned, there are two service areas for the RIP program. We have the north service area and the south service area. And part of NRS, we have to have a regional rational nexus on this, and this is determined also by the dollars per VMT per service area. So we take all these inputs, and we calculate that the total RIF share needed is about $132 million over dollars for the next 10 years. Then we split that, divide that up, where the growth is occurring between the north and south, and you see on the bottom row regarding the dollars per VMT per service area. So once we have the dollars per VMT, we develop a RIF fee schedule for the designated land use, and the proposed RIF fee schedule is shown on the screen and included in your packet. So what has changed? What's different between the current edition and the 7th edition? The first thing is from the TMRP and the travel demand model, it shows that we're driving further. And the 2030 VMT increase over that 10 years has increased from previous editions. Next is the projects included in the RIF CIP reflect the 2050 RTP. And we're seeing a lot more growth in that North Benefit District than in the South. And the fourth bullet point on there, overall, the fees increased roughly 1% across each development type from industrial to commercial. And then the last bottom I'd like to highlight is the fee increase for single unit residential land use was greater than the majority of the other land uses, roughly 7% in the north and 6% in the south. Now this increase was directly related to the number of vehicles in Washoe County. And the total number of vehicle data is collected by the U.S. Census Bureau through the American Community Surveys that was taken in 2019. So based on the action taken today by this board, staff will present the 7th edition RIF update to the planning commissions in October. Then we'll have to the elected bodies for 2 readings in November, December, with anticipated adoption in January of 2022. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have any questions? Anybody online have any questions with regards to the RIF program?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you.
Commissioner Hartung, go ahead.
Thank you. So, you know, the way the system is set up, it's sort of last man in the door, and that is it's kind of a disproportionate way to deal with impacts. So I'll give you the example. I've lived in my house for 34 years, actually going on 35. And the system assumes that I have no impact. Only new development has impact. So how do we kind of correct that so that everyone is paying their fair share for future capacity?
Commissioner Hartung, thank you for your question. So per NRS, we are limited to those impact fees being associated with new development. There's not a way, mechanism to account for existing land uses that are already in use. I think those ways we collect, I'd say that funding through our regional local fuel tax and our fuel tax that collection. So this is just specifically to the new growth and the new demand on our system.
Okay. Well, as you know, the system is broken because, I mean, Pyramid Highway, I'll just use it as an example because I happen to travel it constantly. With the growth, I mean, if it continues the way that it is, we might as well not even worry about upgrades. Let's just buy some paint and stripe it as a parking lot because it's just out of hand. And new growth is certainly contributing a huge amount to it, and it's mostly residential out here. We are seeing some commercial uses which will drive the use, but I don't know how we fix this, board, but it's definitely disproportionate and it's not working. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Is this an acceptance?
It is an action item, so we're asking you to adopt and allow us then to take it to the local governments.
Okay, may I get a motion to adopt?
Move to adopt.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Item 5.2, we're going to set the executive director goals for fiscal year 2022. Director Thomas, I'm going to guess you take the lead on this.
Yes, Chair Jordan, that would be a guess. So annually, we bring to the board both my goals, which are the goals that in great part relate to the organization, but all are basically the tool by which you start your evaluation of me annually. And then after we go through these goals, I also have, on behalf of the organizational goals, which in terms of how they're used, that is part of what we do when we do the annual organizational review and look at the whole organization. The board rates the organization and its effectiveness. So these are important efforts, and also basically the guideposts for how we're going to move forward. We had some issues that moved this back a bit, so you may see things on this list that are already underway, and maybe 1 and 2 might even be completed, but this is designed to be a fiscal year goal structure, so this started on July 1. So I'm going to run through these goals just to reiterate. Most of them you should be aware of, but also to give you an opportunity when I'm done running through them to see if there's anything that you would like to add as a board to give us direction for this year. And feel free too, as I'm going along, if you have questions about how they're worded and whether there needs to be more clarity or confusion about what it is, please jump in. So first, I wanted to start with the update. Thank you. I don't have any way to push it, so you want me to just, oh, I do. There it is. Okay, thank you. We've been talking about the TA set-aside program, which is federal money that comes through RTC. It can't be used by RTC, but is used by local governments for transportation network improvements. And we're looking to streamline and improve that process. And it's already started, I think. Hopefully, each of you in your local governments has had conversations about what projects your body is going to be submitting through that process. So we manage it, but in the end, it's money that's used by the local governments or on behalf of the local governments. We also have as a goal to look at, with the new high school opening soon on Wild Creek, to make sure we've really captured the impacts on Mccarran Boulevard as we're doing the study. Endot is funding a study of the whole Mccarran corridor, and we just wanted to highlight this because we know it's been a concern of the board and want to make sure that that's one of the key issues that we evaluate in what is a very long and substantial corridor. Don't want to miss that particular issue. We also are looking at, in terms of the way we work, to focus a little more or improve what we can in terms of project closeout and learning, internally and even with our partners and consultants, how we can improve our processes based on our experiences. So that's what that particular goal is intended to do. See if I can do this right. Okay.
Madam Clerk, can you please reflect for the record that Commissioner Lucy has arrived? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
One of the upcoming issues that is being talked about with the two cities in the county is how we move forward with e-bikes and scooters. I think it's probably not surprising to anybody that there are more and more electric bikes on the road, and as that technology advances and demand increases and people use them more, it does warrant us looking at it a little more closely. So we're going to be working with our 3 regional partners when we do our bicycle and pedestrian master plan update to look at that issue specifically as part of that effort. We're also going to look at trying to clarify a little bit. We have in our multimodal description a lot of different things, and so there's a desire on my part to give a little more clarity when we allocate money to different buckets, what exactly those mean. While multimodal is a all-inclusive term and covers a lot, it doesn't really give people a lot of understanding what kind of transportation network improvement is going to be provided when we put when you allocate money to that particular category. So that's the idea behind this particular goal. We also are going to be looking at making adjustments where we can to time our project releases so we can optimize the opportunity to get the best price. In other words, strategically releasing our projects for bid in times ideally where there's less competition from private or other entities' efforts to put their projects out to bid. We have the Peppermill parcel, which we bought and we're moving forward with, and you'll see that in the agency goals. We're going to look at this year trying to find a housing partner or a partner that can use the excess property that we were required to purchase by the seller to put some higher density housing along our BRT, which helps us from the standpoint of increasing the opportunity to improve ridership, but also helps the bigger picture issue of the community in terms of housing needs. We're very actively involved in Endot's funding, long-term funding study, and as well as the traffic safety study. So we'll be reporting periodically, and I'm sure, I don't know if Darren has anything today, but I know Christina will probably be giving updates too as the year goes on in both of those areas. We are also going to be looking at more closely the section of pyramid between Ingenuity and Egyptian. And I think these are the last couple, but we really want to focus now that UNR is opening back up and we've got our BRT up as recently as last year, how we can improve ridership for UNR students and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our BRT by making it, by doing a target marketing approach with the students. We want to accelerate, or I want to accelerate the disposal of excess property. We've had quite a bit of properties on our book going as far back as when we did Moana Lane widening, to monetize those so we have more resources to put into newer road construction, but also to get the properties back on the tax rolls so the local governments receive some revenue for the services they're providing to those properties. And then long-term, one of the things I wanted to look at was how we acquire property. And what I mean by that is, for the most part, we often acquire property right when we need it. And while that's probably the best way to assure that we don't spend money on land acquisitions before we really need them, we probably should be looking at other situations where we know road's going to be built and we strategically pick up properties when either they're available or when a situation is right for us to basically be more efficient use of the public funds by acquiring right away when strategically it makes sense instead of waiting till the very end.
Madam Chair, can I jump in here really quick?
Yes, Commissioner Lucy.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, in regards to that long-term property acquisition strategy, one of the discussions that we've had to have is obviously Villanova. You know, our bus depot is with the expansion and the SBX that's moving forward and the project for 395. As they continue to move down there, we're going to have to relocate that facility. What are those discussions in regards to that discussion of relocating that facility, acquiring property now that would be potential for us to build upon? Because this is not going to be an overnight kind of a program, but it is something we have to get started on now with prices the way they are and land availability that's going to be easily accessible, but yet beneficial for us to continue to grow and allow for our buses to, because as you talked further into your presentation about double-decker buses and different things of that nature, we're going to need the height and we're going to need the space.
I would take that inquiry as maybe a asterisk or a sub-point on this particular item to include that. We've talked conceptually with the board about it, but we haven't really actively done it, so I will take that as a direction to me as your executive director to accelerate that conversation and actions associated with purchasing those properties. Again, when their best opportunity for us, not doing it from the standpoint of gotta have, but really, are there vacant properties that are available today that someone wants to sell, and this would be a good time for us to buy them?
No, I think it's perfect, and I think it's important that we constantly look at that. You know, not only putting RIDE in the Villanova facility, but also the Sutro facility. How can we combine both? How can we dispose of those properties adequately so that they're beneficial? But as long as that strategy is somewhere within the acquisition understanding, that's really what I'm trying to accomplish. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
You bet.
So the last couple of items, I think, I guess I gotta look at this before I say it. We're going to be looking at the planning process, next steps for La Posada, the extension of La Posada to the east, as an issue to explore to make sure we're in a better position if what's in our RTP is the eventual potential connection over to Trick. This is not that road, but it's looking at La Posada and what might happen over time as far as the extension of La Posada. So what comes of that is really a planning study, and you will be very much involved in any decisions that would be actions coming out of that, but we felt it was prudent to look at that issue today. We will complete a review, or actually do a newer one, maybe in more detail, about the opportunities for a double-decker bus, primarily related to tourist focus as opposed to a transit element of our current transit system. We are going to really focus on something we all deal with right now, which is really strategically looking at digital marketing and outreach and two-way communication. And this has really been accelerated by the pandemic. And what we've learned is that while a lot of our communication was forced towards this venue, that we actually got much more participation. So we're exploring how to use the things we've learned during the pandemic to improve our interaction with the public when we are seeking their input and participation in our projects. We are going to continue to focus working with our local governments. Particularly, this one's going to be about creating expectations on our projects. There's a lot of challenges sometimes in projects where people are unclear about what exactly the purpose and need of an RTC project is. So this is going to be a very structured effort that will be started with your local government staffs and eventually presented to each of the 3 local governments, in terms of creating some consistency, both in terms of what RTC does or doesn't do, and then also expectations, so people understand, particularly probably members of local governments that don't sit on this board, that aren't intimately familiar with what our role and purpose is. So that's the objective behind that. We are going to create a more formalized follow-up process for you. So you'll know when you hand something or ask us something that we have a report that's structured that comes back to you that says, here's what happened with your request, or here's where it is if it hasn't been resolved. And I think this time it is last item. We will make sure, that, or I will make sure that we adjust our goals as needed based on what happens over the year with, under your leadership. So that completes the goals that I've identified, and certainly would love to hear from you if you have things you think I should be including or things you think that should be on my list for this fiscal year.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of them, but I will turn to other commissioners if they have items that they'd like to discuss in more detail at this time. And Commissioner Hartung, if you just chime in and just say you have some input and let me know, and we'll get you in the queue. It looks as though Commissioner Lucy may have some items, so I'll go to him first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate the opportunity. Mr. Thomas, I think these are very robust goals. I think that this has kind of a wide breadth of understanding in regards to what can be accomplished next year. I do worry that the goals are that they're kind of lofty and, for 2022. The one thing I did not see in here that has always been something that we have focused on here at RTC is that relationship also with our federal delegation, and maintaining with the new reauthorization and the infrastructure funding that we can and will have that opportunity to procure. I think having that more of a robust goal in regards to, we've always had that legislative portion as part of the executive director's goal, so I'd like to see that also in your goals, kind of that relationship with the federal delegation, DOT, APTA, those groups that we work with pretty diligently. And now that we're getting back to somewhat sense of how we can operate normally with the federal government, I think that's important. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I agree with that. that's where, no pun intended, that's where the rubber meets the road, that's where the money comes in, and that's what facilitates our ability. And we heard from them numerous times that the flow of communication and the relationships really is quite valuable for them to know what to advocate for on our behalf, and we've always had such a good relationship with all of them, so fostering that is certainly an improvement. Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Thomas, I just have a base question, and I'll just use number 9 as the example. Identify and present alternatives for accelerated construction of improvements on Pyramid Highway from Ingenuity. Is that just something that we're going to try to achieve, or does that have to be moved over into the CIP and go through that entire process?
I guess the short answer is the results of that will precipitate or could precipitate something being in our CIP or one of our work projects like you'll see in the organizational goals. The purpose of this is to recognize, and the wording is intentional, is to recognize that this is still an Endot road. So we don't have the authority or ability to go in there unilaterally and do anything. So this is going to be a partnership with Endot to strategically look at that particular segment and be aware that their prioritization through the One Nevada plan is different from ours. So it's going to be, I think, a joint evaluation of what needs to be done, and then probably an in-depth conversation about how best, if it looks like it's something that's really important for us, which clearly it is because it's on our list, how we might accelerate that.
Okay. And then one other thing, I didn't see it. I know we have a study going on for Lemon Valley that will go all the way through Spanish Springs, which will include Eagle Canyon, but I would like to memorialize somewhere that the need to widen Eagle Canyon from Neighborhood Way to West Calle de la Plata is it's desperate. And so I know we have to prioritize, and I know that it's really a very expensive endeavor. I won't go through the history of how I begged on bended knee, but and not to you, to previous administrations to do that in past years, but it's something that we really need to deal with. And it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse with, the new developments that are coming online in Broken Hill and Cinnamon Ridge and et cetera. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
In response to that, if I might, I think that would be a good one, just in terms of form and how we're doing this. That would be a good one to put under the organizational goals, which we pull up next. And the way I'm looking at it is, this is the opportunity for the board to weigh in on things they think is important. And that last goal under my personal performance goals is to work with you strategically to adjust them, because as you all know, is we have a lot of things on our plate, but externalities often influence how quickly we can move on them. But I'd rather have you put too much on at this point, and then if we have to adjust or back or move things out a year, to have that be an intentional conversation rather than you feel like we're neglecting something that's very important. So if that could be on when we get to the organizational goals, I think that would be the best place to put it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Madam Chair, one other thing that I, in review as well, that Commissioner Hartung brought to the forefront for me is organizational structure. I don't see much for organizational structure in here either. And so we've had a number of discussions about how things from the pandemic have changed, how we do business organizationally. And we've talked about this a number of times, Bill, you and I, in regards to our RTC is very much different than other RTCs across the country, as we are the MPO and the transit service provider. And so we have a different structure. I'd like to see an audit of our departments and kind of where we can be see some efficiencies that now post-pandemic, what that may look like. And then also an audit of our contractors, what we're doing. How are we performing with those contracts? What is that looking like? So that's really, we are really kind of holding the accountability of those contractors and making sure that there are opportunities through, now that we have in-house legal counsel and we are not farming that out anymore, and we've kind of, maneuvered and made that a little bit more strategic. How can we go and make it a more efficient organization from a standpoint, obviously from your direction, and how would you like to see that go in conjunction with working with the board? And I think that's really important as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I wonder if there's value in, I have a number of questions and comments, but they bleed between item 5.1 and 5.2 and 5.3, because when you talk about the agency goals and your goals, they're very much intertwined. So I just wonder, looking at our legal counsel, if we want to open 5.2 at this time, so we may more robustly discuss all of them, because I suspect some of my comments are going to bleed into both. So.
Madam Chair, I think that would be appropriate. You could consider both at the same time and then take action on each of the items.
Yeah, we'll vote.
Okay, and we'll just vote on them separately, but we'll open both of them and discuss. So I am asking at this time that we open item 5.3 for the agency goals as well, and we'll get into some of those details. And I don't know, Director Thomas, do you want me to chime in at this point or wait until you have gone through agency goals and go back? Or now that it's open, I suspect we can flow between both, right?
My preference would be, thank you, Madam Chair, my preference would be for me to run through all the goals, because, as often the case, sometimes maybe you didn't catch them in terms of the way we worded it, but it might be a similar thing.
Okay.
So that way, when we've cleared all these, we can look at what's been said so far, and we can see if there's additional things to add, and then we can make sure we put them in the right bucket, whether it's my goals or the organizational goal. And as you pointed out, they're very much interlinked.
And Madam Chair, I would be definitely amenable to that type of a process.
Yes, and probably in the future, probably just best to combine them both, and maybe you somehow asterisk them out, but they're so intertwined. So, okay, why don't you pop through these, and then we'll come back to questions.
Okay, so the first one I wanted to touch on, which is really a critical one over the years and has grown in terms of expectations and the amount of funds we've spent, is the Pavement Preservation Program. And so what we wanted to do in this case is start with a measurable goal. So not only would we have a target, but we can report back to you on how we do. So the goal that we've created here is to do 150 lane miles of pavement preservation as the goal for this fiscal year. So we will get those projects pulled together, we'll put them on the street, we'll get them out there, hopefully we'll be able to exceed it, but if we don't, we can report back what were the challenges in terms of not being able to hit that target. Going forward, I would hope these are more of these kind of measures, so you know quantitatively what we're shooting for, and it helps all of us understand if we did or didn't hit our mark, which sometimes is a lot more valuable than just qualitative. So that's what I wanted to point out there. Now, here's the specific projects that we have listed under reconstruction rehabilitation. Many of these are under construction. For example, Kings Row, I think the first phase is well underway. I haven't personally been up there yet, but I'm sure there's cones out and many cones, okay. So these are the ones that can be expected. Certainly for anybody who's watching that wants to know about the consolidated projects, those are on our website, and one can go in there and look and see what specifically those would be including. As far as larger projects or the construction that is really going to be probably most impactful in terms of capacity and probably impact, a larger number of people, are these 4 projects. What I would draw your attention to is Lemon is going to be very significant, because it includes not only that first segment of Lemon Drive as you come off the freeway, but also it's the interchange. We're working with Endot in terms of the diverging diamond interchange. So that particular project is going to be very integral to how we proceed with other projects, and you'll see that here. In other words, we feel that we need to make sure we get to a good point on that project before we start disrupting other roads in the North Valleys, because we have quite a few that are on our list to do. A really big one that's going to be kicking off soon is the Audie Wells. We've executed the contract. That project's getting ready to go. And that one hopefully You'll be hearing very good things from the community, but it is, as we learned on Virginia Street, when you go into a fully developed area, it's fraught with a lot of things that can be challenges and complications. So no doubt we'll be hearing, and you probably will be hearing from stakeholders and constituents. We'll do our best working with our contractor, Granite, to stay on top of it and address those issues. But that's going to be a very significant project for our community. Sparks Boulevard widening, we've got an early action project that we started looking at that very large project, which would be south of the freeway. And we're looking at starting that this fiscal year. As far as Mill Street, I think you may recall the project that runs from Terminal East to Mccarran was originally put on hold because we had the Audie Wells Boulevard project come in significantly over budget. We were able to move some projects around and start that one up. So that one should be going out to bid very soon here. And then we're working very closely with Endot with the Spaghetti Bowl project, SBX project, as far as the next improvements to to Mill Street as it goes through the freeway interchange. And that obviously is very connected to what Endot's doing with their improvements. As I said earlier, in the North Valleys, we're going to be following up Lemon Drive Phase 1 with Sky Vista very soon thereafter. The idea would be to gain a position when we're at the right point in terms of Lemon improvements that we could then quickly move to the Sky Vista Parkway improvements. Two projects that we're going to begin design on are the Arlington Bridges Replacement Project. That is about to start with the environmental process. It is, as I think I've shared with the board, our #1 project in terms of federal money, and have been very successful so far in getting our federal delegation to commit funds that they're allowed to commit to this project. So we'll be very much on top of that. The second one, which is a very significant project, is really refining the Lemon Drive Segment 2 project. And I think you're probably going to hopefully be hearing from particularly City of Reno and Washoe County, some of your staff, about how that project might integrate with other things that are going on for those local jurisdictions. We talked today about the RIF impact fee program, which will be finished this fiscal year. The street and highway policy goes hand in hand with what I talked about in terms of getting clarity amongst all of our partners on what is and isn't a regional project, and how we fund those and what elements are included. We are going to be looking at using the ICAs to better facilitate understandings. And what I mean by that is, rather than those being kind of a blanket, non-attention getting agreements when we come for significant projects, the idea would be with the local government whose jurisdiction that the project's in, there's clarity on what expectations are and who's doing what, just so we can make it more effective and efficient, not only with our contractors, but also between us, government to government. The bicycle pedestrian master plan is going to be updated. In addition, we'll be working on the ITS system master plan, which is one I'm very excited about, given the benefits we've seen from the efforts that our staff has done with the university on signal timing. Perhaps most importantly in the world of transit is we will be starting on our transit optimization strategy plan, and that one we have hired a consultant, and that consultant is starting work on this very important effort. And the reason I want to focus on this is because this really is set the table for what we do as an agency for the next few years. Looking not only at what's transpired in the industry as a whole, but also what's happened locally in terms of development patterns and growth and needs. And obviously with the pandemic, we learned a lot and things have changed, and a real focus is going to be on what does the future hold for us. It'll also delve more into the Flex Ride, which was really a trial transit program when we started a couple years ago. So we'll be in a better place now to look at what's actually happened in our community and have this consultant provide a report to us on options going forward. We will complete our Lono FTA grant, which I think we've already got. I believe we already have that grant, don't we? Yes. we're going to pursue funding for the Arlington Street bridges, which I mentioned earlier. And then also we have two things that are active on the extension of the BRT South. One of them is we have a planning study grant with the federal government to fund that. We tried once but didn't make the cut, but we've resubmitted it, and we think we have a better opportunity this time. And in addition, we've been talking about using revenues that we have left over from the Virginia Street project in terms of what monies were allocated from the federal government for that project to reinsert those back into Virginia Street BRT improvements. So that's what this captures. We did get even though it's on here as a perspective, we did get the hydrogen fuel cell grant from the federal government, so we'll be implementing that. We will be looking at Vision Zero and trying to get a little more concrete and specific about improvements and more descriptive responses to you as a board in terms of progress that's been made under that program. We will, of course, continue to work closely with Endot on the SBX, the 395 North project, Mount Rose, and the Geiger Grade Roundabout project. So I'm really excited about where we're at as recently as this week in conversations about the Mount Rose study. And I think you'll be seeing in fairly short order some suggestions back to you in terms of possible improvements in that corridor in the future. We'll be starting the Verde planning study. Our goal as far as ridership on the ride program is 15%. This is kind of uncharted waters coming out of the pandemic where we lost at one point 60% ridership and then settled in, I'd say, around 30%. Our goal is to add 15% more back. And so we'll be reporting on that. We'll be working with Downtown Reno Partnership and we've actually already started this to increase security and safety around the 4th Street Station facility. And then, again, this is one of those that was started at the beginning of the fiscal year, but we'll be reporting back soon to you on what we learned from the pilot project between the southern part of Washoe County and Tahoe over the summer when we had the pilot Flex Ride program. A couple of facility improvements. You should see work starting on both the elevators as well as the great room in our facility on Terminal Way. As I mentioned earlier, Pepperell Mill BRT station is in design. We'll be moving forward with the design, and hopefully we'll see some movement on that in terms of the next year. The Mccarran Loop study, a very significant study. I think many of you have mentioned issues related to that. Again, that's an Endot funded study, but we're actually the lead on that, working with Endot, and we'll be updating you as that moves forward. We are going to continue to look at the expansion of the 4th Street station. Right now, we don't really know when we're going to be able to close on it, so we're just going to complete the due diligence and work with the city of Reno in terms of that property purchase and exchange. And that is everything I have.
Goodness gracious, could you have a few things on your menu? That's a lot. I'm going to jump in on some of mine, which you covered in the second presentation, which I'm glad because it was absent in the first, so I was glad it was covered. With regards to the TA set aside, I know at the City of Reno, we had identified a couple of hours, and one of them we wanted to bring forward as a potential funding option, a hotspot at Lake and 6th, I believe, to see about a roadway flasher installation. And so I'm bringing that forward as a potential option for the TA set aside. It is in that zone that the data supports as a high accident area, so I'd like to have that on there. The excess property disposal, I think this is a huge priority for us. We went through the legislative process to allow us for that disposal. And when I say disposal, some of these odd parcels are just ripe for projects like the Sage Street dorms, et cetera, particularly if they're on transit lines. I think our housing needs are so severe that us partnering for some of those creative housing opportunities is really a way that we could maximize some of these excess properties. So I'm excited to see those move forward. Digital platform, I know that's a huge one. Commissioner Lucy and I have had some meetings on this, on consolidating, so that whether you finding from the user, the end user, what best fits their transit needs. Maybe it's flex ride, maybe it's a fixed route, maybe it's access, maybe it's right move, traffic safety, pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, particularly outside or adjacent to the school zones, I think is critically important. We get that all the time, and I think we need to start seeing some more projects on the road. The Mccarran study, do we know when that's going to be finished? The Mccarran Loop
I'll
study?
ask Dan if he would address that, because he's managing that project for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan Denges, Planning Manager. For the record, we are currently underway with that. We just did kick it off about a month ago. In talking with our consultant team, our hope is to finish it within about a year. That could slip a little bit depending on what our public outreach looks like. We actually have a meeting next week to kind of discuss strategies and on how to best engage the public. So just ballpark, I would say probably a year to like a year and 3 months maybe for completion.
And those studies will incorporate all the accident data, speed data, all of that, correct?
Correct, yeah, as you know, there's a number of studies that have been done, and that's done a few safety management plans, and there's been a lot of analysis at intersections, so we are incorporating all that existing data, plus actually doing some new counts and intersection analyses as well.
Oh, good, okay. I just know I'm going to say this, I've said it a number of times, you know where I'm going, Kings Row and North Mccarran, high speed, major accidents occurring there, people making U-turns where they should. Bus, at the Downtown Reno Partnership, we had these discussions again about how we, from use the word kind of more of an entertainment experience, and how this might attract the student population and the visitors to introduce themselves to transit. That might be the gateway to open those eyes and those opportunities. And we always hear about how can we get more shorter, quicker routes just up to the university and back to downtown or beyond. So I think that's a creative way to do that. And the pavement preservation, does any of the pavement preservation get into some of the local roads, or are they all just regional?
The short answer is those are regional. I don't know if we tangentially touch any of the local roads. I don't know, Doug, if you might want to elaborate a little bit, please.
Thank you. And then I just have one more after this, and then I'll be finished. Thank you. I should have had a timer on myself.
Yeah, Madam Chair, for the record, Doug Malloy, Engineering Manager. Regional roads as identified in our RTP. So it does include some collectors and some industrial roads in addition to those that have that 5,000 trips per day. So yes, I mean, they're all agency roads, City of Reno, Sparks, and the county, of course.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does help. I know just as the City of Reno, we always struggle with the pavement preservation of some of our local roads, which I'm sure some probably come close to some of those trips, and how we are supporting some of the, use of our local roads, I think is important too on the pavement preservation side. I know we've talked about that as a board on how we might better distribute or look at expanding some of that pavement preservation into some of the local roads. I think that's something, however, we might be able to look at that. I think that's important. Thank you. Thank you. And then finally, the last thing that I have, and to Commissioner Lucy's comments about evaluation of our personnel benefits package and things in which we are offering to not only the RTC staff, but what our subs are offering to attract and retain employees. We're just in a very different time now coming out of COVID. Flexibility is a big deal. Attraction of quality candidates and retention is paramount. And I think we need to know not only what are we doing to meet the day and the future, but what are our subs doing to meet that? And how does that compare nationally? In other words, what if we have X number of bus driver vacancies, how does that compare to other transit agencies? I know Las Vegas just had 273 school bus driver shortages. So I don't know how we compare nationally on the transit side. I know everybody's struggling to get employees, but understanding what we're doing for RTC employees now and going into the future to meet their needs and what they want to see, as well as our subs. I think that's important. Okay, I think I'm done.
You want me to take a shot at it?
Yes,
All right, I'll clear the air for you for a minute.
thank you.
One other thing. Okay, I'll try to step back from that thing. With the agency goals that I really want to make sure that we, and it's in here, but I just want to continue to highlight that is the work that we're working on with the state in regards to Mount Rose and Geiger Grade. I think those are important that we continue to move forward with those as we're looking at fuel tax, but we need to continue to collaborate with Endot to find any resources available for that. And one of those resources that I would turn our eyes to is the CMAQ funds. CMAQ funds that, Representative Titus, who sits on the Transportation Committee and Infrastructure Committee for the House and is one of the senior majority leaders up in that committee, has been very beneficial for us and has introduced lots of legislation to bring an overhaul to the CMAQ program, improvement program. And there is funding, significant funding, not only for Clark County, but also for Washoe County from that to help with the more urbanized areas for transit and whatnot. So I'd like to see us kind of focus on some more of CMAQ funds and what we can do collaboratively with the state, with those funding, and how we can utilize that either for transit, the Peppermill station, BRT, whatever that may be. I'd like to see some of that. One other thing I did not see in the agency goals that we've been working on is the microtransit. Microtransit is something that we've seen that has been highly beneficial in the city of Sparks and through some of our routes. I'd like to see how we can integrate microtransit a little bit further into the city of Reno and through some of our urban areas, because I think that is highly beneficial, especially for our university, for the northwest part of Reno, by the campus where a lot of our students live. Microtransit might be a better option for them, and something that we could do in conjunction with this with the UNR. And then last that I'd like to see is kind of a user study. I was having conversations with the executive director or CEO of the Airport Authority, Darren, and Tina Iftiger, and also our CBA. How do we look at this, and EDON, who are our users? In this transition, we've received our census data back. Washoe County saw an increase of 65,000 individuals from 2010 to 2020. We're seeing a significant growth in our community, but that's not just that's just Washoe County, not our full catchment basin. And so I want to see what the user study is. To the chairwoman's point, we've got to start identifying how efficiently we can utilize what the population needs. And is that tourism when we travel to Salt Lake, when we travel to different places of that nature and see their mass transit, how are they effectively utilizing that, and how can they make it so that their tourism is driven that way, commercial? One of the things that the airport is telling us is that the reason that they're seeing overload in their parking structure is there's a lot of individuals who are flying out of the airport but are now commercial flyers and business travelers that are leaving and going for their work to travel somewhere else from their local company here and leaving their long-term parking there, which is causing an issue at the airport for people in and out. How can we assist with that? How can we move people differently through that airport? I think that's always been a cohesive partnership at any municipality, is to identify how we move people in and out effectively out of our mass transit arenas. Whether they're tourists, commercial business, or residents, how do we get them to and from our airports? How do we get them to our train stations? How do we get them to and from their places of work, utilizing our mass transit and making it effective? To the chairwoman's point, making it not just making it for everybody and making it truly a desirable utilization of our mass transit. Do that, we put so much money in, we have wonderful roads and wonderful facilities. Why not make it more appetizing for individuals? So I'd like to see those things, and I'll go back to the, just to update once again that I think it's more executive director based instead of agency based, which would be the organizational structure, out of those departments. I'd like to look at some of these different policies that we have, obviously, that we can be more efficient with, and understand the new era of which we're working in. Everybody keeps talking about a new normal. There isn't no normal, it's just life. We just have to learn how to live now and what it's effectively. But I don't think we need to be, I don't want to see us move backwards. I don't want to lose traction. So I want to continue to increase policies that help with morale, but at the same time, increase efficiencies. I think, people need to be in the office working. I feel that that's important. I need to know how we can achieve that and help you as a board to achieve that, but at the same time, keeping safety as an issue and also keeping morale as an issue. So I think those are important for me as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Commissioner Hartung, then Commissioner Delgado.
Madam Chair, here, let me. I apologize. My phone was about to die. So I want to dovetail on a couple of things. I totally agree with Commissioner Lucy with respect to microtransit, but maybe in a slightly different way. We've recently instituted it out in Spanish Springs, and I'd like to see it used in a deeper fashion in the outlying areas, because we don't have any transit out here. And it really could change the face of how people commute if they know that they can utilize microtransit instead of their own. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to dovetail on what you said, Madam Chair, about the pavement preservation. What we're seeing is quite a lot of roads that were listed as just collectors have really turned into arterials, and I can cite a number of roads that fall into that category. So how do we identify those roads and then work with the local jurisdictions so that we are preserving them and dealing with them because they are highly traveled. I like that concept of what you talked about, Madam Chair. The other issue that I think that we need to look at in terms of pavement preservation is how do we keep the public aware of those roads that will be up for slurry seals or chip seal, whatever it happens to be, for maintenance, and making sure that the general public knows that these things are going to happen and give them a reasonable time frame. And by the way, we had some of this go on in Spanish Springs, and then the contractor couldn't get the oil. And so people based their schedules around it, and it really turned into quite a debacle, which was a problem for some maintenance that people were doing on their own homes and being able to park on the streets and utilize the streets. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to ultimately deal with that sort of in a different fashion. Just, again, communication. And then the final thing, under agency goals, Mr. Thomas, I know it's in the CIP, under RIF, it was the pyramid phase one, to widen pyramid. Is that not going to happen? Is that not an agency goal in 2022? Widen it from essentially, we'll call it Queen or Far Way to Los Altos?
Go ahead. For the record, Doug Malloy, Engineering Manager. Commissioner Hartung, that project is going to start construction late 23, so I believe it would be outside of this fiscal year goals.
Okay. All right. Okay, you guys explain that to Mayor Lawson. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Delgado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One I'd like for the agency to consider as part of their goals is the change in landscape of the Wells corridor. With the recent density changes and also the changes of some of the businesses to now being restaurants, we received a lot of concerns regarding just pedestrian safety and general vehicle speeds, et cetera. So if there's an opportunity to consider south of Mill Street, the Wells corridor, in terms of addressing and assessing vehicle and pedestrian safety, I appreciate that added to the agency goals. That's all of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. From Mayor Lawson's mouth, saying we covered it. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of your input and participation. I know Bill was over here taking notes feverishly, and I know there are a lot of items on these goals. I did want to close out with something that I think is something we all could do a more robust job of, and I've certainly seen it in my years on the RTC board. I see it on the city council board. I saw it my many years of human resources, and that is communication. And we, particularly during COVID, communication was both easier and more difficult. Easier in the sense that you could have a Zoom or you could shoot off emails or memos, but there's always nuance that's lost in that. And there's not always a lot of back and forth that occurs on those platforms. And what we discovered is absent some robust communication with both your staff or the public, people begin to write their own story. And sometimes those stories are absent maybe some factual information or some updated information, and then certain things start to blossom and grow and become bigger issues. And I think we really need to do a more robust job of, if we are looking at a project, and I'm going to use the Center Street cycle track as an example. If there are discussions and things going on between agencies where problems have been identified, which they've been identified on Center Street. I know the City of Reno staff came to our last council meeting and said they have serious concerns with it. Those discussions have been going on for quite some time, but I think because those weren't daylighted earlier as significant, potentially fatal flaw issues, people kept going down the road that there was something, just intentional stalling or something going on, and that I don't believe that was the case. I think there were robust and very transparent and appropriate conversations going on, but they weren't done in a more global sense, and people started to write their own stories. And then we have meetings where we're trying to correct the record and get the right facts out, and everybody has very strong feelings about things they're passionate about. And I just feel like people are far more receptive if you just say, there's a problem, and here's the problem, and this may not happen. Early on, people will be more receptive to a no than silence. And I think we just need to do that with all of our projects. If through our processes we find that a community or agency idea or input is having issues, we need to be as vocal, saying that we've identified problems, big problems, and here's what they are, and let's see if we can work through them. And if we can't, we have to be honest about it and say we can't. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. And communication with staff is always critical. COVID just really threw a wrench in all of that. Feelings, you can't feel that through a memo. That's why being in person is so important, getting that two-way conversation. And I know that's important to you as well. So thank you very much for letting me drone on. Okay. Director Thomas, what else do you need from us at this time?
I think I have, as you pointed out, a fairly extensive list, and I think I understand everything you've said here. I would, on the pavement preservation, just to capture this right, I do think that this is a good time, both from what you've said as a board, as well as things that I've observed with our staff, and kind of the interest of doing more with the same amount of resources, that it's probably time for us to do a really in-depth analysis of where we're at, because the one thing I don't think any of us would want is there may be local streets that just have been neglected because local governments don't have the money, and then we go take care of them, and then some major road that even more people are aware of falls apart. And so I think it's all about conscious decisions when we make them, and our job is to make sure, working with the local partners, that we present it to you and we present it to the local governing bodies what the choices really are. And somebody, unless we get more money at the end of the day, somebody's going to be waiting for someone else. So we just need to make sure communication, like you said in your last point, there is done well, and there's analysis that says if we do this, that won't happen, just so everybody's aware of the consequences of the trade-off, so. That's how I would prefer to capture that whole conversation about pavement, is to come back to you with a more in-depth analysis of what does it actually mean.
I think that's fantastic. Mayor Lawson?
I'm gonna try and make this thing work. There you go. Do we use the pavement condition index like we do in Sparks? But we know by ward what our pavement condition, where we gotta put our money. So, I mean, do we have a map like that for the RTC?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. We use the PCI. We actually work with our regional partners closely on those, on looking at the streets, and it is really a joint agreement when roads rise to the top for the active year. I think the question really is kind of one of which I've been struggling with, is as we're building more roads, we just need to figure out a way to assess what that's gonna mean too, right? Because the last thing we'd want, I'll just use Veterans Parkway as an example. We built that major road that people are now used to having, and so we wouldn't want that to fall in a state of disrepair. So it just needs to be conscious, like what is the level of effort we're gonna put in all these roads? As we build new roads, expand roads, it adds to the burden, so it's not like there's more and more money coming to cover for it. So we just have to be strategic, like where we pick. And I think the process right now with PCI and with our regional partners is very good. Part of that may be more communication on how that's done too.
That might be for me. I'm having not quite a year on the board, and I still haven't seen that from the RTC, so that's my fault for not researching that prior, but that's something that comes up in our meetings in Sparks quite often. Because as you imagine, roads are kind of a sticking point for most people.
Quite important. Okay, thank you, everybody. And at this time, I'm looking for a motion. We're going to take two separate motions. Item 5.2 to accept the executive director goals for fiscal year 2022 and take in with those the input from the board.
Madam Chair, if I may, can I make a motion to move forward with the executive director's goals for Mr. Bill Thomas with the additions that have been brought forward today and noted by Mr. Thomas?
I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. May I get a motion of similar type for item 5.3?
Chair, I will make a motion for item 5.3, the FY 2022 agency goals, with the additions that were brought forth in today's discussion and notated by the executive director.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Item 6.1, Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO items. Welcome back to the podium.
Thank you. Again, Dan Denges for the record, planning manager. So I want to briefly run through a quick presentation on the Lemon Valley Spanish Springs Connector study that's been going underway. This is also a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, or a PEL. Just to kind of clarify things, we initially started calling, when we started this study, we called it the Eagle Canyon Extension. But as we kind of delved further along, we realized in hindsight that, you know, there are other potential routes to be evaluating, not just the one that was conceptually envisioned off at Eagle Canyon. So probably a lot of these slides will look familiar, but just wanted to give a quick recap and refresh, kind of bring everyone up to speed. So the purpose and need of the study was really looking at a roadway to connect the two growing communities of the North Valleys and Spanish Springs. Also to improve regional traffic circulation. Obviously, it's no secret to a lot of people that we do have a lot of congestion up in the North Valleys and Spanish Springs along Pyramid Highway. And also looking at improved emergency response times and potential evacuation routes, particularly with the Reno Sparks Indian Colony that's up there in Hungry Valley. Some additional goals that came out of this as we started to look were looking at possible formalized access to recreational opportunities. There's a lot of OHV trails and horseback riding stuff in Hungry Valley. The colony has expressed some concerns about you know, just some of the damage and erosion that's happened as these are a lot of informal trails are being made. Looking at potential to expand public infrastructure along whatever roadway corridor that would be selected, as well as some economic development opportunities. And this is another one kind of early on that the Reno Sparks Indian Colony identified. And then looking at Eagle Canyon, since we did start with that particular roadway as a possible connection point, just looking at some of the recommended safety and operations improvements along that road. So just to kind of frame this again, this is really kind of just scratching the surface, doing our due diligence, looking at these potential alignments through the Pell lens. So we're really kind of even just looking at project feasibility at this point. And just want to dispel any misconceptions that this isn't something that's going to happen, even in the next 10 years. We're not moving any dirt, so it's not going to be leapfrogging other projects that are already underway and on the books. We will be reevaluating this as we go kind of into the next phase, looking at the continued growth and land use development out there in those communities, as well as those associated traffic patterns. So with that, we did kind of have a host of different alignments we looked at. Through various modeling efforts, we were able to kind of narrow that down into 3 potential alignments, which I will delve into a little further here in a moment. And again, just framing the geographical context, so the project areas, as inset to the region is, again, basically the North Valleys or Lemon Valley specifically in Spanish Springs area. In between, on the map, you can see the darker brown color represents the Reno Sparks Indian Colony land, and then there's a lot of basically BLM land surrounding that kind of throughout the Hungry Valley area. Again, doing our due diligence, we want to do a kind of a high-level environmental screening. We did look at things such as wildlife species, considered EJ populations, looked at land ownership, any existing park and recreation facilities, as well as water bodies and wetlands out there. So, we were able to incorporate this in all our models, identify any routes that, would have to be absolute avoidance areas and kind of eliminate that or kind of plan around those. So this slide shows the 3 alignments that we kind of landed on. Just working way from north to south, the first alignment would have a connection at Shawnee-Va Road, go up through into Hungry Valley, kind of tie in where Eagle Canyon Road currently runs in the tribal land, and then head over to the west, not particularly on Chickadee Drive because that's not really a sufficient road, and there's a lot of housing that fronts that road, so we wouldn't want to run traffic right in front of people's homes, but looking at some sort of a new road or a realignment of Chickadee, and then tying ultimately into, and then hooking into that same alignment as the previous alternative. And lastly, we looked at a southern alternative, which would connect in the vicinity of Lazy 5 Parkway off of Pyramid Highway, take a more southerly route, and tie in somewhere along Deodore Way, along Lemon Drive. And again, these are very high level, conceptual. We haven't really looked too in depth at, any right-of-way, impacts or that sort of thing. Shifting focus a little bit now to existing Eagle Canyon, since that's, again, where we did start with this. We want to look at some of the safety and operation improvements on there. There's about 6 recommendations that we are providing here. These are pretty low-hanging fruit for the most part. A lot of it is really looking at lighting improvements and some striping improvements and some of the approaches at those intersections. We have specific recommendations like a median refuge island for pedestrians at some of the islands there. As you know, there's a high school, middle school, a park, so there's a lot of, children and people using those facilities that are on bikes or walking. So one of the other recommendations was to extend the existing shared use path there along the north side of the roadway all the way up through to the high school, and also some curb and gutter improvements. This kind of serves 2 purposes. It would essentially stop people from parking in the bike lane where kids are using those to utilize to get to school, but also really improve a lot of the drainage and erosion issues that are occurring along the roadway because of that. And then just in general, some ADA improvements. There's a lot of heaving in some of the sidewalks and that sort of thing, so just making it more accessible for everyone. So at this phase, with the draft report, we did quite a bit of outreach on that. I recorded a virtual meeting on our website, obviously having to pivot a little bit because of our current pandemic times. And we did some news releases and partnered with our COLA 8 partners to do a Road Ahead segment. We've brought it to our technical advisory committee, and of course we've had the project TAC, which we've worked with along the way throughout the development of this process. I will add too, we did have a separate meeting with Reno Sparks Indian County Tribal Council. We were fortunate to have that and get their input. They understand too that this is kind of just the first step, so very preliminary. Why they didn't show a preference for a specific alternative, they didn't really have any opposition to what was being presented, knowing that there's further study to be involved. And one thing I wanted to address that I overlooked in the last slide, kind of in regard to Commissioner Hartong's comments earlier, within the report there is an appendix that kind of evaluates the cost, high-level planning cost for widening existing Eagle Canyon Road. That is also currently in our regional transportation plan in the 2031 to 2050 timeframe. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you. Yeah, this obviously goes right through center of Spanish Springs. So Dan, talk to me about the ADTs, because if you look on page 52, it shows 2050 ADTs for Eagle Canyon at 17,225. Is that accurate?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Hartung, for that observation. And just without getting a little too far into the weeds, just a little background on how those ADTs are derived. When we're updating our travel demand model, we use the counts that Endot performs. The RTC really doesn't have the resources to go and do new traffic counts throughout the region, so we kind of use those estimates from our base year and then extrapolate out based on the projected land use and employment. We did do separate counts specifically for this study that was done back in November of 2019. They were hourly counts, but they did estimate ADTs from those. And so what we determined was, I want to say at the heaviest volume segment on Eagle Canyon, they were closer to about 18,000 currently. So
Currently.
Yes, correct.
Currently, that's the not 2050.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be pedantic in this, and I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but the ADTs already exist, and so whatever we do in terms of looking at Eagle Canyon as a route, it really, and blessedly you pointed out, and appropriately, that we've got a high school, we've got a middle school, we've got a park, and there's a daycare center there, and then just off of Neighborhood Way there, of course, is senior facilities, which don't drive a lot of traffic, but that does not include all of the residential areas that utilize Eagle Canyon as, I know it's listed as a collector, but it's really more almost of an arterial.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Hartung. And as I said, with the kind of the next phase of this, as we do a deeper environmental analysis, we will be updating those traffic numbers and really kind of probably doing some micro simulations to focus on those corridors to get the most accurate information we can. So again, I do apologize for that discrepancy. I just wanted to kind of identify the two different data sources that those volume numbers are coming from.
So, and one other thing, if I may, Madam Chair, when you guys look at funding for this, have we talked to the tribe about getting federal assistance through the BIA for those portions? Because there's a huge portion of this road, regardless of which alignment is chosen, huge portion of this road goes across tribal land.
Yes, and that has come up in conversation with the tribe. Again, I think when we do that deeper dive into selecting an alternative, we'll probably have more in-depth conversations. You know, for all we know at this point, once the tribe kind of hears from the community, the tribal council that is, you know, they might come back and say, you know, we really don't want to see a road going through on existing Eagle Canyon into the colony. So I think we still have kind of some progress to make before we get to that point, but we'll definitely be looking at all funding opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the commission?
Chairman,
Go right ahead.
thank you. Dan, too many mics going on here right here. This one's just not good today. I'm gonna just turn it off. Oh, how about that? We'll just put it there. Oh, wow. My goodness. There we go. All right. Dan, can you hear me
Yes,
now?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Jeez. You know, to Commissioner Hartung's point, as you continue to look at, now I don't have any mic, but that's all right, you can hear me.
Speak loud.
The issues that we see out on Military and Lemon Valley and in those growth roads out there, you know, we talked about, as I pointed out earlier today, we've seen 65,000 people move to Washoe County in 10 years. And I think a majority of that growth has happened in just the last 5 years. And when we talk about these types of growth numbers, we can't rely on today's ADTs for that future planning. And I think we've missed opportunities now. I know we're speaking directly about Lemon Valley, that connector between Spanish Springs and Lemon Valley, but the two districts that grew the most outside of mine were District 4 and District 5, Spanish Springs and Lemon Valley. And when we see that type of growth and we see that there's not much in regards of open land and space, the development we're going to see is that push north. So I see the need for this, but I want to make sure that we are aptly, approaching these types of programs and we're building these roads that are going to be sustainable well into the future. To Commissioner Hartung's point, we had a missed opportunity in my opinion, and so is his, that Pyramid Way should have been built and widened all the way to Disk Drive. However, when we did it just to Mccarran, that was great. We solved a lot of problems with Pyramid Way. However, we did not satisfy the problem of making it all the way to Disk. And what I don't want to see going forward with our future planning is to kind of just piecemeal some of these roads together and just to today's numbers and not really truly anticipate that growth. Because you drive to Lemon Valley now and you look at some of those new, and it's important for the county as a whole, is that we have those new industrial centers up in Lemon Valley, from Amazon to Makita to Petco, you name it, those businesses are up there. A lot of those individuals are living in Spanish Springs and doing this commute through I-80 and through the Spaghetti Bowl, and then until we have the improvements on through the Spaghetti Bowl and on 395 and I-80, we're still going to be funneling that traffic not only through Pyramid and onto the freeway, but also through off of Mccarran and up through Sun Valley. And so it's important to get this connector right now versus to the executive director's point, we built the Southeast Connector with the anticipation of all of this growth, and now we're utilizing that highly. We've had to change the speed limit after the fact. We've done a number of things to that road that we've had to go back and address. We're already having to I saw that they were doing slurry seal on the Southeast Connector just last week. And so when we talk about those types of improvements, we've got to anticipate that growth. And I don't know if we're doing a good enough job anticipating that growth, especially with this. So I'd like to make sure that we are looking further down and we're really bolstering those numbers, because it's easier to go back, it's easier to move ahead and build it bigger than it is to go and expand it after the fact. And get those right-of-ways and get those different challenges that we can accomplish right now. So those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments at this time?
Just bravo, Commissioner Lucy.
All right, looking for a motion. I have a motion to accept the report. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. This time, we're moving on to item 7.1, Executive Director Report. Director Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point in my presentations, I wanted to congratulate a couple of employees, RTC employees. First, Jacqueline Maldonado, who's an administrative associate who's been with RTC for 15 years as of October 5th. So very thankful for her efforts and her contributions to our organization. And then Steve Kemp, who's a senior IT analyst who's been with us for 5 years as of October 17th. So I want to thank on behalf of all the RTC staff and the board, those 2 fine members of our staff. Another congratulations to our engineering manager, Dale Keller, on the birth of his son, Alexander Dale Keller, who's a future RTC engineer, right? Baseball player, yes. I'm sure Dale and his wife have great hopes for the young man, but just want to make sure we congratulate him. RTC is monitoring and will likely participate in a proceeding that was recently initiated before the Nevada Public Utilities Commission. This proceeding is related to Senate Bill 448 from the 2021 legislative session. Senate Bill 448 is a fairly complicated bill that was aimed at accelerating the adoption and use of electric vehicles in Nevada. We are determining the extent to which these proposed tariffs and rates that will be associated with this may impact our operation of the bus fleet. As you know, about 30% of our buses are electric, and so the rates we pay for electricity have a great bearing on our productivity as far as the transit system we run. We felt the need to engage an expert, particularly since it's likely we may have to intervene to protect our interests. So we hired Richard Campbell, who's of counsel with the law firm of Kemper Kroll, to represent RTC in these proceedings. So as that moves forward, I will assure the board that we will keep you apprised of what we're doing and what we're learning. That process, as I understand it, is by design of the legislature to move pretty quickly. And that was part of the reason we felt the need that we needed to hire somebody quickly to be able to bring us up to speed, someone who can really tell us about this area of law, area of practice that is fairly unique. Similar to other businesses locally and across the country, our fixed route and paratransit contractors, Gillis and MTM respectively, are experiencing unprecedented staffing shortages for drivers and mechanics and pretty much all employees. A memo regarding the driver recruitment efforts by our contractors, both of our contractors, have been shared with the board. I will make that an attachment to the board minutes. I do think it gets to, I think, a question that the chairwoman had about what we had been doing, well, not what we've been doing, but what our partners have been doing, our contractors have been doing to actually look for employees. So I think you'll find that informative in terms of the efforts that are underway. And then in conclusion, make sure I get this right, I wanted to announce that this is Amy Cummings' last day with RTC. So appreciate Amy strategically hanging around to be able to attend this board meeting. Amy's been with the RTC for over 11 years. In fact, Monday, I think, was her 11th anniversary. Serving as a director of planning, deputy executive director, and the interim executive director back in early 2020. Her dedication and commitment to the work we do at RTC has been outstanding. She is a respected leader and visionary among her peers at the local, state, and federal level and within our industry, demonstrated by her accomplishments and achievements that she has led during her tenure here. She was the architect of many federal discretionary funds RTC received during the past 10 years, funds that help create more jobs and improve the needed transportation structure for our community during the unprecedented growth we've experienced, as Commissioner Lucy has pointed out. She was a strong advocate of the importance of transparency, best practices in open government, which raised the stature of RTC within our community with local and state and congressional leaders and with transportation officials across the country. Thank you, Amy, for your service. I'm appreciative of the time we were able to work together this past year. We wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I'd like now to play a little bit of a video which highlights many of her contributions, just to commemorate those, both for the board as well as the staff of RTC. So, Michelle, if you would.
Okay, Amy, now we get to put you on the spot. You clearly are such an underachiever with all this. Holy smokes, holy smokes. 11 years. Sometimes you forget how quickly 11 years goes by until you start seeing all these pictures. And having been on here, I don't know, 9 years or so, I remember so many of these. And Amy, my goodness, you have been at the core of so many of the significant projects for RTC and for this community. And what you will leave is immeasurable. Your children will enjoy it. That's so significant. You can point to so many projects that your children will enjoy. So I'm going to put you on the spot. You said you wanted to talk under general public comment, but would you like to come up now?
Thank you, Amy Cummings, RTC, for one more day. I just want to say a big thank you to RTC for giving me this opportunity to serve our community. And all of the accomplishments that you saw there, I mean, that was not me. That was the entire team. You know, I see Dan, I see Michael, the leadership team of the planning department, and the entire RTC staff. I mean, we have all been working in the same direction to bring these accomplishments to fruition. And throughout everything, I think what made us successful was always being grounded in that community engagement process, which you've been such a champion for all throughout. And bringing, like Commissioner Lucy was talking about, we're working with our federal delegation, we're bringing those competitive federal dollars, we're embracing that federal process, which brings us that discretionary funding and also keeps us out of trouble. So that's been a big priority for us too. And just being very transparent in the data that we have, the analysis that we do, and working with the public. But again, it's not me, it's the entire RTC team. And the talent and the dedication of the individuals that you see in those photos, and the new folks who weren't there in some of those photos. I mean, we have staff at all throughout the organization who are nationally recognized, state recognized experts in their fields. And they're so dedicated and so passionate about what they do, and that's what makes these great projects happen. And I'm going to miss all of them terribly, but I will be cheering on RTC from the sidelines and continuing to, you know, look at the great things that are to come and just, you know, supporting the quality of life and safety and mobility and accessibility for our region. So I do want to say a special thank you to the staff in the planning department who've been there for me all this time, but again, the entire organization. It's just wonderful people. So continue to appreciate them and treasure them and all the work that happens. So thank you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Amy. Do any other commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Lucy and then Mayor Lawson.
Madam Chair. Keeps turning off on me. There you go. Amy, this has been a wonderful ride with you. You have been such a force for RTC, not only here locally, but it's been a pleasure to serve with you for the last 8 years and really see what you really do behind the scenes, and the ability to make this organization run the way you have under Director Gibson and now with Director Thomas. You have been institutional. And to the chairwoman's point, the work that you've done is immeasurable. It will be time, we'll never be able to tell how long you have had an impact on this region. And as a resident and a father, I want to thank you for all the work and time you've put in, because it's truly amazing. And I've really enjoyed working with you for the last 8 years. So it's been my pleasure to be with you, and I gladly wish you the best going forward. I hate to see you go, but this is going to be, not a farewell, but just goodbye for now, right? So thank you so much for all your work, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mayor Lawson and then Commissioner Delgado.
You know, when I think of RTC, Amy, I think of you. You're there. All those community meetings that we have attended over the years, the Mccarran and Pyramid Project, I mean, that was a big deal when I first got elected, and you were out there in front, answered all the questions and made it happen. We're gonna miss you. And good luck on your next chapter in life.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Delgado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As all my colleagues have stated, thank you, Amy, so much for your contributions over the last several years. After coming back from grad school from Michigan, it was really, it was kind of a newer kind of mindset or thought to bring in community as part of the conversations of building out. And so it was really great to see that that was already taking place under your leadership after moving back home. And so in 2012, you really taking it on and actually seeing it happen is something that was really refreshing. That it wasn't just these big progressive ideas in these bigger cities, that it was happening here at home. So I'm glad that you're able to make that happen and over the years, and we're better for it. So thank you for all your contributions. It means a lot. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are certainly a lady in the lead. Go forth and conquer. You've been fantastic. We're going to miss you.
Thank you so much. I'll miss you all too.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Okay, we are on to item 7.3, the Endot Report. Oh, wait, did I miss the federal report?
No, Madam Chair, you missed me.
Very brief, which is, I'm sure everybody who's watched the news knows that the infrastructure bill was passed out of the Senate and forwarded to the House, and that the negotiations are going on, or the conversations about what that might look like. So I don't have anything to share with you today that's new from the last board meeting, but as soon as we get any clarity of what it means to us as an agency, we'll share it with you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the Endot Report.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. First, on behalf of the Endot team and myself personally, we'd also like to say thank you to Amy. Congratulations on your career and good luck into the future. Okay, as always, we'd like to begin with safety. You'll see on the slide, thank you. There have been 243 statewide traffic fatalities so far this year. That's up 26% from the same time in 2020. In Washoe County, there's an increase of 6% in traffic fatalities in that time, from 31 this time last year to 33 by the end of August this year. That includes an increase in bicyclist fatalities, with one year-to-date this year, when last year we had none at this point. Motorcyclist fatalities in Washoe County have decreased 11%, and pedestrian fatalities have dropped 20% year over year, so that's a good improvement. Once again, the top causes of these deadly crashes were impairment and speeding. One tragic case in point, a 62-year-old Sparks man died after crashing his Dodge truck into a FedEx semi-truck last month near Gregg Street in Sparks. Sparks police are investigating the cause of the crash, but the authorities say the Dodge driver was driving fast as he veered off the road into landscaping before hitting the semi-truck, stopped at a stop sign. The semi-truck driver and their passenger were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The Dodge driver passed away after being taken to the hospital. Nevada's Sustainable Transportation Funding Study launched in July, and the study's advisory working group met earlier this week for the third time. At the meeting in August, the AWG members received an overview of transportation revenue resources and uses in Nevada. Additionally, RTC Washoe, RTC Southern Nevada, Campo, TRPA, and Endot gave presentations on their respective transportation funding challenges. DCNR and the Governor's Office of Energy also provided overviews of statewide policies, laws, and goals related to energy policy and reducing carbon emissions. This past Tuesday, the AWG participated in a more in-depth discussion of transportation revenue in Nevada and the U.S. and the U.S., and they're working on develop guiding principles for consideration of alternate sources. There will also be a brief presentation on the impact of electrification as Nevada increases its number of zero-emission vehicles. We will continue to keep the board abreast of the AWG activities through the next year, and as always, we appreciate the RTC's valuable participation in the group. We appreciate the executive director and his team in all of our common projects and goals. Endot's annual work program was approved at the State Transportation Board on Monday. In light of that, last month in the director's report, Director Swallow provided a refresher to this RTC board on how we develop future projects and provide for all modes of transportation. The statewide transportation improvement program and the work program recently completed a 10-day public comment period. No comments were received as part of that public comment period, but we did receive public comment as a part of this week's State Transportation Board meeting. The next step, the annual work program, will be provided to the LCB as required in the NRS. Using the One Nevada Plan performance-based decision-making process, NDOT develops future transportation projects to best meet the needs and goals of the state and those using the transportation system. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to work with the RTC, Washoe, and other metropolitan planning organizations, counties, cities, tribes, and local agencies to develop the comprehensive statewide planning document to provide a transportation system that keeps Nevada safe and connected. A little bit more detail on the, thank you. Here you see the average historical expenditures across the state. This is 2011 to 2020. The amounts shown here reflect expenditures or spending. That's the total under the dollar column. You see that historically, Washoe County has received nearly 17%, Clark County 56%, and other Nevada counties about 28%. Some of the factors shown here are considerations for our geographic distribution. Since geographic distribution is often the most asked about harmonization factor, we felt it important to share with you the factors we use in considering a reasonable distribution. Annual obligation amounts will vary from year to year as projects start, and we don't have a specific target distribution. As you can see from these pie charts, we have a challenge with balancing a statewide system that provides essential connections to communities throughout the state with the majority of the population where they live and drive. This figure shows the distribution of investments in our annual work program for FY22 and planned obligation amounts for NDOT-led projects and programs over the next 4 years. That's a little tiny, but I believe you have the paper copy, so if there's any questions. This dollar amount and percentages shown reflect planned obligation amounts only, not expenditures. We have projects in every single county. Keep in mind, due to rounding, some of the lesser amounts show a 0% in this graphic. Again, the dollar amounts and percentages shown reflect planned obligation amounts, not planned expenditures. And if there's any questions about that, I can answer it.
Are we prepared?
I have a couple more, sorry.
Okay.
A couple more slides, thank you. We'd like to provide our monthly SBX update for the board. Traffic configuration updates provided last month remain largely the same, including the eastbound I-80 to southbound 580 Spaghetti Bowl ramp, which has temporarily been reduced from a 2-lane to a 1-lane. Looking ahead, a section of Kitsky Lane, which is shown here in red, will be closed from Galletti to Coonsley from 8 p.m. tonight to 6 a.m. on Monday morning. A nearby detour is available on 2nd Street. The pedestrian access will be maintained by actually a shuttle to accommodate pedestrian traffic through the operation. We've also extended a closure of the Wells on-ramp through November 26th. The original closure was planned to be ended on September 27th, but another closure was planned in 2022. Our crews were able to combine operations into one phase, reducing impact to drivers and eliminating the need for a second closure next year. Drivers wishing to access the interstate can do so via Wells or down to 2nd Street. Travel delays obviously should be expected. We're encouraging everyone to use alternate routes, allow for extra time, and to be careful in the work zones. We have some updates as the North Valleys become increasingly urban or more populated. We're right now giving our stakeholders and partners a preview of our plan to update the 395 Cold Spring Highway exit signs. We wanted to preview for this board these proposed changes coming to Cold Springs next year. Currently, 2 highway exits access the ever-growing Cold Springs area. Exit signage only notes the general Cold Springs and border town areas. We're going to install more specific highway signage as is needed to designate the exits. One will be White Lake Parkway, and then the one you see of an example in this slide will be Village Parkway. We plan to change the signs as noted, and designating the highway exits after the road name is more appropriate in such areas. The signage change will take place in the second half of 2022 as part of our project to repave 4 miles of 395 between exit 80, which is the first Cold Springs exit, and the state line. One more slide. We want to share an update on the board with our Endot response to the Caldor fire. Although the fire crews have been successful in substantially reducing the threat from the fire, we know that Washoe County leaders and residents also watch the fire closely. We'd like to recognize our team for going above and beyond these last few weeks to respond to the fire, support our other emergency response partners, and to keep our highways safe for the traveling public. Endot developed and formulated a traffic control plan that was utilized for the successful evacuation of the South Lake Tahoe community. We implemented traffic control and equipment to keep roads safe and helped our emergency response partners to limit traffic headed into the basin. Our partners at the NHP and the National Guard screened those attempting to enter the Lake Tahoe area. While evacuation orders were lessened, Endot team members remained in standby mode at multiple locations, closely monitoring the scene and watching the wind, ready to launch back into action. Even though evacuation orders have been removed, we know this fire impacted all of us across northern Nevada. We're incredibly grateful for our crews, firefighters, and other emergency personnel who have worked tirelessly to help those impacted by this devastating fire. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have any questions or comment? I know Commissioner Hartung was wanting to pop on to say some words with regards to Amy, and I think he was having trouble unmuting himself. So we'll cover some NDOT questions if we have any now, and then we'll go to Commissioner Hartung. Anybody have anything for NDOT? Okay, you're not, Commissioner Hartung, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Okay, I apologize. I wanted to chime in and just tell, I don't want to take us backwards. I know we're almost done. Thank you so much, Amy. You will be sorely missed. I appreciate the collegial efforts that you've put in over the years and just how closely you have worked with us and kept us in the loop. You're amazing, and you'll, again, be sorely missed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. We are now going to move on to item 8, Commissioner announcements and updates. Mayor Lawson.
So I'd like to ask Director Thomas if we could get on our reports or somewhere on the agenda is a report from Keolis on what's going on with them, where we are with just about everything. As comprehensive of a report as we can get.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hartung, do you have anything?
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would ask that staff come back and bring a report on the updated study for the Mount Rose corridor and potential improvements on that road in conjunction with signalization on that road with NDOT. And then I'd also like to look at a report from staff as we talked about roads that are owned by RTC that, to Commissioner Hartung's point, that were at one time identified as regional or arterial roads that may need a difference of definition. So I want to know what it would take to get to that. And then I also want to look at what roads that we maintain versus NDOT versus the municipalities, and how there could be some disposition of transferring roads to the county or acquisition of roads that need to be in the portfolio of RTC so that it's a better utilization of funds versus having this kind of mismatch to the point of NDOT having to take care of Holcomb Ranch Road when as a state highway when it's really a county road. And so those are the discussions I would like to have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tedford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of points, Commissioner Lucy. The Mount Rose corridor study is currently underway. It's planned to be completed by the end of the year. Then we will have that information on what's recommended for improvements along the corridor. And agreed on local roads and the challenges that we have there, and a state route that runs a that makes a C shape. That's one state route and 3 different city names, and that's a ongoing challenge, balancing funding and opportunities to make those trade-offs, and we appreciate those.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hartung, I think you might have popped on.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it. Director Thomas, do we have a strategic planning session forecast soon?
Generally, it would be associated with before we do the budget, but I'm thinking probably early part of next year, later part of this year. It really would be up to the board in terms of your timing. I mean, I don't want to overlap with your jurisdictional strategic planning because it's probably going to be consuming to do that. So perhaps I'll poll each of you to find out what time works best, and we can set that up as a special meeting to have that conversation.
Thank you very much, and maybe that goes on as a future agenda item. I just think as we come out of the pandemic and we are re-envisioning RTC's processes and how we're operating going forward, I think probably having that strategic planning session sooner rather than later is important for all of those reasons, which will then help to guide some of the priorities as well that we have identified. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to move on to item 9, which is public comment. And I believe Sandra Rosenberg wanted to speak on the Endot item, but we're at closing public comment. Did you want to speak now? Oh, it's about Amy. Okay. Well, we're actually, I think, towards the end for public comment. So if you want to come on down and speak now. I don't think we have another item that we're reopening specifically.
I know there were other folks that can speak as well. Good morning, Sandra Rosenberg for the record. I am actually, for this comment, representing myself, even though it has to do with my role at Endot. I have worked with Amy for her entire time at the RTC and just a little bit before that, actually, on some conferences and regional strategy workshops. She has been incredible as her role at the RTC, as a mentor to me, as a planning professional in the region. I would have had a much more difficult time coming into my role if I didn't have her to bounce ideas off, get ideas from. You know, we all have the folks we go to when we're entering into new roles and new beginnings. She's just that. She's a true public servant. I know you mentioned the public outreach and engagement. That's her passion. She's extremely intelligent and a fantastic planner, but she really cares about the people and doing what's right for the community. And so I just wanted to echo all of your sentiments about what a loss it is to the RTC. But I'm thrilled to hear that she's staying locally, and I look forward to working with her in her new role. And I can't say any more or I'll start crying, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very kind. Okay, we have one more, I think, Kyle Plaskin for public comment. Does anybody else? I think this might be the last one. All right. Good morning.
Kyle Plaskin again with the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance. I'm going to ask you to reopen item 5.2. I missed it, and I'm sorry. That's the goals of the executive director. The integrity of this board is demonstrated through transparency and public engagement, accuracy, and it's reflected in the actions of the executive director, Bill Thomas. And the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance, we really do appreciate the engagement of the executive director, Bill Thomas. He's very responsive. However, an area for improvement is transparency and consistent messaging with the public and the RTC committees. On June 29th, he sent an email to the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance saying, quote, pausing the Center Street project after completion of the 30% project plans was my decision. This was directly the result of an intended new study. Now, it was a pause in his own words and his own decision, and he made this decision without the input or involvement of the RTC's own Citizen Multimodal Committee. Some of the members of that committee were shocked. Their purpose was being sidelined completely. 2 months later, the Reno News and Review reported that quote, in an interview, August 27th, RTC Executive Director Bill Thomas said, it's not accurate to characterize the new study as a pause or delay in the Center Street plan. That's a direct contradiction to his earlier message to us. Through significant public comment to the board and RTC and to the City of Reno and meetings, it appears that this pause has been lifted now, which is great news. But it's really important that we pay close attention to the course of events here and learn from our mistakes. It should be the goal of this board and the executive director to be consistent in messaging to the public, to the media, and involve RTC's committees that are created for this very purpose. Please encourage Executive Director Bill Thomas to be consistent, to involve the RTC committees, and be consistent in the messages to the public and the media as a future goal. I'd really like you to reopen 5.2 and discuss, give Bill a chance to respond, and so thank you again.
Thank you very much. Anybody else during general public comment? Any other commissioners have any questions or comments at this time? Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. 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 We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.